They were missing by inches. Thousands of shells, millions of dollars, and the sky was still full of enemy planes. In 1940, Britain was running out of time. German bombers crossed the Channel almost every night. Sirens screamed, cities burned. Anti-aircraft guns fired endlessly into the dark. But hitting an airplane with a shell was almost impossible. To destroy a bomber, a shell had to explode within about 70 feet of it. Not direct impact, just close enough for the blast to tear metal apart. The problem was timing. Gunners had to calculate altitude, speed, direction, wind. Then they set a tiny mechanical clock inside each shell before firing. If the guess was wrong by even a fraction of a second, the shell burst harmlessly in empty sky. Most of them did. The sky over London glittered with wasted explosions. Across the Atlantic, American military planners were watching closely. If Britain fell, the United States would stand alone, and American scientists knew the truth. Their anti-aircraft guns were not much better. At the center of this looming failure stood a quiet physicist named Merle Tuve. He did not look like a man who would change the war. He was a farm boy from South Dakota, raised among cornfields and hard winters. He grew up fixing machinery with his hands, taking apart radios, solving problems because there was no one else to solve them. Now, he was in Washington, working at the Carnegie Institution, brilliant, precise, soft-spoken, and stubborn. In 1940, the U.S. Navy approached him with what sounded like a fantasy. Build a fuse that could think. A device small enough to fit inside a 5-inch artillery shell, strong enough to survive being fired from a gun at 2,000 miles per hour, smart enough to detect when it was near an airplane and detonate automatically. Not by time, not by impact, by proximity. It sounded impossible. When an artillery shell is fired, it experiences forces over 20,000 times the force of gravity. Any delicate electronics inside would be crushed instantly. Vacuum tubes of that era were fragile glass bulbs. They shattered easily. Even a rough car ride could break them. Now imagine launching them out of a cannon. Most experts said it couldn't be done. Tuve disagreed. He believed the answer was radio waves. If a tiny radio transmitter could be placed inside the shell, it could emit a signal as it flew. When the signal bounced off a nearby aircraft, the reflection would return to the shell. That reflection could trigger detonation. The shell would sense the plane and explode at exactly the right moment. Simple in theory, almost absurd in practice. The Navy gave him a small team. They worked in secrecy under the bland name Section T, hidden in a laboratory in Washington. The war had not yet fully reached America, but it was coming. Inside the lab, they faced one brutal problem after another. Vacuum tubes shattered during test firings. Circuits failed under acceleration. Batteries died mid-flight. Even when the electronics survived, the signal was unstable. False triggers, no triggers, random detonations. Every failure meant starting again. But Tuve refused to abandon the idea. He demanded stronger components, smaller tubes, thicker glass, better shock absorption. His team tested shells by firing them into sandbanks along the Chesapeake Bay, then digging them out to inspect the damage. Each time, something broke. Each time, they rebuilt it. Months passed. Then, Pearl Harbor happened. On December 7th, 1941, the illusion of time vanished. The United States was at war. Japanese aircraft had devastated the Pacific Fleet. Suddenly, the Navy desperately needed better anti-aircraft defense, not in theory, now. Tuve's project moved from experimental curiosity to national priority. Factories were ordered to manufacture specialized miniature vacuum tubes. Private companies were brought into the effort. The work expanded rapidly, but secrecy remained absolute. Even many military officers did not know what was being built. The fuse had a new name, VT, for variable time. The name was deliberately misleading. By 1942, prototypes were ready for combat testing. The Navy made a bold decision. Instead of using them against aircraft over land, Where a malfunctioning shell could fall on civilians, they deployed them at sea. The first real test came in the Pacific. American warships faced relentless Japanese air attacks. Dive bombers screamed down from high altitude. Torpedo planes skimmed just above the water. Gunners fired desperately. Then, for the first time, shells equipped with the new proximity fuse detonated near incoming planes. The difference was immediate. Planes that would have slipped through exploding bursts of mistimed shells were suddenly torn apart mid-air. Near misses became lethal. Accuracy did not increase by a few percent, it multiplied. In some engagements, the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire more than doubled. Crews reported planes exploding before they even reached bombing range. Japanese pilots noticed too. They began breaking off attacks earlier, flying higher, hesitating. The invisible wall around American ships had hardened. But the weapon was still fragile in another way. If one unexploded shell fell into enemy hands, the technology could be reverse-engineered. The Allies took extreme precautions. Orders were strict. VT fuses were not to be used over land, not where a dud could be recovered. For nearly 2 years, the secret remained mostly at sea. Then came 1944. German forces unleashed a new terror against Britain, the V-1 flying bomb. Pilotless, fast, hard to intercept. Thousands were launched toward London. Air defenses struggled to stop them. The British needed help again. The United States agreed to release proximity fuses for use in ground-based anti-aircraft guns over England. It was a calculated risk, but the threat was overwhelming. When the new shells were deployed, the results were staggering. V-1s that previously slipped through barrages were now detonated mid-flight with far greater frequency. Success rates jumped dramatically. British gunners described it as if the shells had become intelligent. The sky above London changed. Fewer explosions over rooftops, more burning wreckage falling harmlessly into fields. And the innovation did not stop there. In late 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, German forces launched a massive counter-offensive through the Ardennes. The weather was cold, the forests were dense, American infantry faced overwhelming pressure. Artillery became the key. For the first time, proximity fuses were widely used in field artillery against ground troops. Instead of burying into the soil before exploding, shells detonated in the air just above enemy positions. The blast spread outward in deadly arcs of shrapnel. Trenches offered little protection. German prisoners later reported devastating losses from these airbursts. Entire formations stalled, momentum slowed. One innovation, one invisible sensor in the sky, and suddenly the battlefield shifted. By war's end, over 20 million proximity fuses were produced. It was one of the most complex mass manufacturing efforts of the conflict, and one of the most secret. Many historians would later rank it among the most important technological advances of World War II. Some placed it just behind radar and the atomic bomb. But unlike those projects, there was no massive public unveiling, no dramatic press conference. Merle Tuve did not become a household name. He returned to scientific research after the war, quietly, methodically. The farm boy who once fixed radios had built a weapon that could sense its enemy in mid-air. He had turned artillery from guesswork into precision. In the burning skies over the Pacific, in the dark above London, in the frozen forests of Belgium, countless lives were saved because a shell no longer had to hit its target to destroy it. It only had to come close. War is often decided by strategy, by courage, by numbers. But sometimes it turns on a single idea, a radio wave inside a steel casing, a stubborn scientist who refused to accept impossible, and a moment when the sky itself began to think.